What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So for this horror movie review, we will be looking at and discussing the film Ed Kemper that came out earlier this year, actually came out earlier this month. So for a little bit of background for the film, as I normally would do, it stars Brandon Kirk in the lead role as Ed Kemper Jr. It also has Cassandra Gava and Brink Stevens. Hopefully I pronounced those names correctly, and many more. But those three are the primary leads, actresses for this film. And obviously Brandon Kirk, who's playing Ed Kemper, is the primary focus, right? So this film was directed by Chad Farron and written by Chad Farron and Stephen Johnston, and was released, as I mentioned, on VOD and digital earlier this month. I believe it was on April 7th or April 8th of earlier this month. So it's just been, week and a half, 2 weeks, give or take, since it's been released. As any standard, side note, I'll say this probably later on again, I'll probably emphasize this fact as it relates to my opinion and how I view films like this. I do feel this does fall within the horror genre. I do feel like serial killer stories do fall within there. I do think it's a subgenre of horror. Again, that's just my take. I know it's also part of the true crime genre as well. Obviously it is, but I do feel the serial killer aspect does have a place as a subgenre for horror. So like any other horror film, it does have that typical runtime. This one has it's an hour and 33 minutes, so very normal what we would see and what we've really been seeing for the past, I'd say, 5 to 8 years when it comes to horror films, maybe even a bit longer than 8 years. But for your standard horror film, that's typically their runtime. So before I get into the film review, for those who are not aware of who Ed Kemper is, he is an American serial killer whose crimes did span for quite some time. And I say the span of time, it's not that he was committing crimes for this full period. It's really, okay, this is when his first crime happened, and then his last set of crimes happened at a later date. It wasn't like as if, again, during this full two time periods he was committing crimes. I just want to make that clear. The span of time started from August 1964 through April of 1973. So yes, while that is 9 years, he wasn't committing these crimes for those full 9 years. So I just want to be that clear. He had a total of, I think it was 10 victims. So, and two of those victims were very close to him, which we'll cover off on later. As a result of those of his crimes, he was given other names. I think, like many serial killers do tend to get when the media starts to find commonalities in their crimes. Or the killer, like for example, like the Zodiac, kind of gave himself that name. It wasn't necessarily the media, but in this case with Ed Kemper, he was also known as the Co-Ed Killer, Co-Ed Butcher, the Mad Titan, and Big Ed, just to name a few. Co-Ed Killer was probably the most predominantly used once the victims, again, there was a commonality amongst the victims, amongst 8 of the victims. I think it's actually 7 or 8 of the victims. There was a very much commonality between them, which again led into why he was given that name by the media. So as I mentioned, as far as his time spree of his crimes, he was first arrested in 1964, and his second arrest and his last arrest, when he was finally captured and he wasn't freed again, was in 1973. He did receive, for those 8 murders, 8 life sentences, and he is currently 76 years old. So yes, Ed Kemper is still alive, and he is currently still at the California Medical Facility. I did look into this a bit further. His last parole hearing was held just last year. I couldn't find exactly when last year it was held, but records do indicate it was held in 2024, and obviously he was denied. And after he was denied, they did a further evaluation, and he was classified as a high risk to reoffend if he were to ever be released. And he's not eligible for parole again until 2031. And that's even assuming he even lives to 2031. I mean, it's 2025, it's another 6 years. So he'd be, 82 years old depending upon when it would fall or when his birthday falls, 82, 83 years old. I don't know if he's necessarily going to make it that long. He suffers. It's recorded that he suffers from diabetes. He's wheelchair bound, and he has coronary heart disease. So I don't think he's going to live to see his next parole hearing. And even if he does, they wouldn't. I can't imagine they're going to parole him at that point, anyways, at 82, 83 years old. When he was arrested in 1973. And after he was convicted, they did do a re-diagnosis of him, and as far as what was going on, he was re-diagnosed as antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypal personality disorders. So I thought that was interesting that, and we'll get into it a little bit more when we get into the film review. How in when he was arrested in '64 and he was soon later released, I think 4 to 5 years later. He wasn't diagnosed this way. He was given a completely different diagnosis, which is why he was released when he was, and then ultimately led into the crimes he committed and was rearrested. So before we now move into the film review aspect of this video, I want to be clear specifically about this topic of serial killers. I want to be very, very clear. I do not condone, support, agree with in any way, shape, or form, excuse me, with the actions of Ed Kemper or any other serial killer. This video and the channel and the content that I do here is strictly just about like horror movies, horror TV series, things of that nature. So this review and what I'll be speaking to is specifically related to the movie, how the movie's presented, the actors, the actresses, things of that nature. So I just want to be very clear about that. I in no way advocate for any of the actions he's taken. I have no opinion on his clinical conditions, what he's been diagnosed with. I'm just simply, the information I've already provided is simply just what is currently out there as public record for him. So now, as I always do before we get into the movie, a little bit of the movie review, I will be talking some spoilers on this. I won't be talking full spoilers because I think if you know anything about this type of content, true crime content, much of it's going to be, I don't want to say repetitive, but pretty self-explanatory. So we're not going to do like scene by scene spoilers, but we will be talking some spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you plan on wanting to see this movie, I'd say pause, go watch the movie, and then come back, finish this video, and then drop a comment in the comment section and let us know if you agree with our review and our rating of the film. I'd be interested to know those who have seen the film. So please do that if you decide you want to still go watch it. So again, one final warning: we're going to be talking some spoilers. So now moving forward, so I guess simply put, this Ed Kemper, the film gives the viewer this film gives a very uneasy, unsettling, and at times it can be difficult to believe when you look into the mentality of someone who is just truly a cold-blooded killer. But the film doesn't treat this as, oh, he just woke up one day and decided I'm going to start committing these crimes. The film does, I believe, do very well in driving home what I think led him to, like, almost what put him on this path and led him to this point. Now, I'm not making excuses for him. I'm not saying the film does. Everything in the film, and then based on my research, was very true to what had transpired and what he had experienced. So again, I'm not saying he's justified in what he did. I'm just saying it probably nudged him on that path. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So Ed Kemper, the film tells the story, as you've already mentioned. It's a real life serial killer who's played by Brandon Kirk, and I'll say he was the perfect casting for this part. Based on what I've seen from various recorded interviews of the real Ed Kemper, Brandon Kirk played the role perfectly, and you can truly tell he embodied the role to give viewers a as close to reality view as possible as to who Ed Kemper was and the things that he did. I think that was one of the most striking parts of this film. and that you don't necessarily see in other films, whether it's specifically when it's related to like true crime or even serial killers. I think we find some people who try to play those roles and they don't necessarily hit home, especially when you go compare it to the real individual, if they're still alive or just recorded content that might be out there from old news reports. But if you go watch old news reports, you can definitely see where he embodied that. And there's almost a resemblance between the two, which is a little bit eerie as well when you watch the film. So while most of the film takes place in present time, it does have some minor time jumps to when the crimes took place. We do get some flashbacks to when Ed was a young child and the abuse he endured at the hands of his mother, which does continue into the present time where the majority of this film does take place as he's an adult. We also get a few flashback scenes to the moments leading up to, during, and the immediate moments after Ed murders his grandparents, which led to his first arrest in '64. So he did that. I think he was 15 or 16 years old, somewhere around there. He was arrested and then was put away so he had to have been 16, because I think in the film he was put away, I think they mentioned for 5 or 6 years. So he's either 15 or 16 because he gets released at 21 as depicted in the film. So we see a young Ed being released. So we do see the young Ed being released from the psychiatric hospital. So we do see in the beginning that flashback scene of that crime taking place. And then we jump into, I'll say would be the current present time that the film starts in when he's being released. And they don't really have any concerns for his mental well-being. And meaning the doctors believe he was ready to return to society, that he had, he's pretty much rehabilitated. Okay. So as he goes to return to live with his mother, and then immediately we see the relationship or lack thereof between the two of them. We see the verbal and mental abuse pick right up from the start, and you can see almost a switch start to flip within Ed. And you can tell he's gonna start to get to a point he can no longer live this way, and he needs to find an outlet for that rage. We make a short. Then we quickly, after a few minutes of interaction between the two of them, we do get what I believe is another short time jump because in that time jump, Ed does look slightly older, as if he's been living with his mother for a little bit of time now. He has a job, he has a car, and he's trying to insert himself back into society the best that he can. But at the same time, we see the film shift also to his mother, Maud Kemper is the name, who's played by Cassandra Gava. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And we see on the interactions when she's not around her son how she speaks, very much disdain of him. She has what I believe is a secret girlfriend in the film. She's trying to keep that relationship secret from people that they know, considering the time period this is happening in, late 60s, early 70s. But also she's trying to make sure no one really either knows that Ed exists, one, or two, if they do know that Ed does exist, that, he's been away at his grandparents, or he's been away here, or, she doesn't try to bring him up in conversation because she's just that disappointed with him. So she does all that she can to keep her life very secret, and at times just hides all these facts and, again, what Ed has done in the past. So after a night of drinking and further mental and verbal abuse from his mother, the next day we follow Ed as he comes across his first two victims. And this brings us roughly 30 minutes into the film. So thus far, the film has been a bit difficult to watch, especially if you're someone or someone who was abused or as a child and has been and continued to be abused into that young adulthood. This is where the film, in this 30-minute mark, takes, I think, the biggest dark turn. And from here, the film doesn't look back. The film starts to show us the degree in which Ed has committed his crimes. From this point forward, I would say for a film based on a serial killer, this is one of the more graphic films, and this being as close, and I believe this is being as close to a representation of what happened in real life. Again, based on what's available from public information. It's hard to, but some of the things, I mean, from the point of obviously him murdering individuals, decapitating them, dismembering their bodies, and then doing other things with their bodies. I won't go into detail there. You can watch the film or go research what he actually did. But it's hard to believe someone would commit such horrible acts to others, along with what he did to the victims, as I mentioned, to the bodies afterwards. And it wasn't just a something he did quickly and then dispose of the bodies. It was something he would repeatedly do to the bodies over days before he would dispose of them. So the film is not just about following the actions of a serial killer. It attempts to show us and give us some insight into what really drove him to commit these crimes, as I mentioned earlier. And once he felt his quote-unquote work or his purpose was complete, we see in the film he turns himself in. He calls the police, pretty much says, hey, this is who I am, this is what I've done, and this is where I'm at. And they eventually come and pick him up. But unfortunately, this came at the expense of 10 victims. And as I mentioned earlier, 2 of them being very close to him. His last 2 victims, he was his mother and her lover or friend. Again, in the film, they portray her as her lover. But those were his last 2 victims. So, and we've received other films based on serial killers. For example, like Zodiac. Zodiac has been widely covered. But I don't think many people know of Ed Kemper, and this film's pace was very well done and keeps you engaged fully throughout the film. Unlike other films, again, like Zodiac or those covering like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, other serial killers, this one literally takes you into that mindset of the killer and attempts to show you firsthand what happened. Other films like Zodiac, which I absolutely love. I think it was 2007 Zodiac came out. Absolutely love that film. It's one of my favorite films of all time. But that's an example of where a film attempts to leave some of it up to your imagination. While you do in that film see some of the killings happen, they don't get nearly as graphic as this film does. Which, again, I think just kind of opens your eyes to think, wow, this is what really happened. This individual really did this to people. And it's just crazy to think that someone could do this. Several times throughout the film, we see what appears to be a demon or a devil. Specifically when we see the flashbacks of Ed as a child, where his mother has locked him in the basement for whatever reasons that she has. Again, she doesn't like him, doesn't care for him, especially since his dad had left the home. We see that brief moment earlier in the film, again, through another flashback. But again, when he's specifically locked in the basement, and while the film does not give us really any insight as to what this means or represents, I believe it's part of what he was later clinically diagnosed with. Which kind of drove him to believe that violence was necessary. Because one of the last times we see this demonic spirit, this devil, this demon, one of the last times we see it talking to Ed as a kid in the basement, Ed has moved from being scared when he first saw this demon to now having like this sadistic smile and almost being in very much agreement with this demon. So it was almost as if he was accepting it, and then ultimately led him to his first, crimes when he was 15, 16 years old. So I'll say if you're interested in true crime, thriller, mystery, serial killer type content, I would highly, highly, highly recommend you take the hour and 33 minutes and watch this film. I do understand, and I haven't seen it, but I do understand a director's cut of this film was premiered at the 2025 A Night of Horror Film Festival. I do hope that we get this version or the director's cut released sometime in the future, whether that's through digital VOD or if this version, because the version that I've seen is the R-rated version. And maybe if that gets a physical media release, that we'll get both versions. But either way, I think it's definitely worth taking the hour and 33 minutes, watch the film. I think it was done very, very well. So I normally do my ratings out of 5. So for me, and again, this is just for my personal taste, we will all have different opinions on how we rate this film and any other film. I would give this film a solid 4 out of 5. I could possibly, because I'm focusing it and watching it in a silo of serial killer content, I could even potentially go between. I don't usually do anything, between like a 4 and 4.5. I could possibly, if I was going to make an exception, I could possibly go in between that. But it's a solid 4, no doubt, and I would highly recommend the film. I enjoy true crime genre and subgenre films. I do consider, again, as I mentioned earlier, serial killer content as a subgenre of horror. And I do not think we get enough of these types of films that truly show the destruction that these individuals had caused. Many communities, families, and friends, especially, the number of victims that we've seen from other serial killers like Ted Bundy, for example, was in north of 30, 40 victims, or I think they confirmed 20 or 30, but he had claimed, I think, 50 or more. And we've seen countless documentaries of those who do their best to describe the actions of these individuals, but nothing like this, where the film dives into the deep end to show you and give you an idea of just how bad people can be. And I think that's where this film has differentiated itself from other serial killer content, because I felt it dove right into the deep end. It didn't shy away from the fact of what Ed Kemper did, what he was about, and how gruesome he was. And this film does its best. And again, not seen the director's cut, so I don't know how much different it would be in that version. But from the R-rated version, they tried to show you just how brutal he was, obviously without taking it beyond an R-rated version, whether that's unrated or NC-17, right? But some of the scenes are very difficult to watch, and again, just hard to believe that someone could do something like this to another individual. So anyways, that's going to do it for this horror movie review for the film Ed Kemper. Came out, I think it was, again, May 7th or 8th on VOD and digital. I will put the links in the description of this video below, where you can check out the official Ed Kemper website for this film. So make sure you go over there, check it out, show them some support. Great individuals over there. Again, great film. Also, I will drop the link in the description of the video below for where you can find it on Amazon. If you would like to rent it or purchase it, you can do it there. I'm not sure if it's available on other, like if it's on Apple. I believe it might be on Apple as well, but I do know for a fact it is on Amazon. So again, I'll drop that link in the description of this video below. And also drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If you've seen the film, I would love to know what you thought of the film. Let me know what your score was out of 5. I would be highly interested in that. If you haven't seen the film, still drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know if you plan on seeing the film. If you look, I don't want to say enjoy. Enjoy is not the right word to use, because these films and this content is based on true stories, like real events. So I don't want to say enjoying this, but if this type of content interests you, drop a comment in the comment section. Still, I would like to know if this type of content does interest you. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next one. Later.